Okay, let's. All right, welcome into an emergency MinerTalk podcast presented by the Oscar Arieta Agency, alongside Sal Montes, Samir Montes, Zay Galindo. I'm Adrian Broaddus, and we are here today because UTEP head coach Dana Dimel has been fired. We're jumping right into it, guys. We got to talk a lot about this. We can peel back everything that we talked about last night on MinerTalk. We went almost 2 hours, yet we're going to still go today, this morning, and talk a little bit more because there's a lot of thoughts. And after 6 seasons, UTEP head coach Dana Dimel has indeed been fired. Sources initially broke this out to ESPN's Adam Rittenberg, and Dimel finishes his tenure at UTEP going 20-46 over 6 seasons. He finished a 7-6 season in 2021. That will be known as his best season at UTEP. And he finished this year 3-9, last year 5-7. That's back-to-back losing seasons for this UTEP football program. And as a result, UTEP Vice President and Director of Athletics Jim Center said this morning, quote, "We would like to thank Dana for the dedication and hard work that he put in over the last 6 years, and we wish him the best in the future. Under his leadership, our football program has shown improvement in all the academic metrics, and we have minimal off the field issues. When he was hired, UTEP football was coming off a winless season, and he built a more competitive team. However, we have not seen the kind of improvement necessary to compete and win championships. We determined that a change in leadership was needed for the program moving forward." Well, guys, I felt like this one was coming. I had really no kind of, I guess, reservations if this was going to happen. It was more of a win. This is going to happen. Last night, we talked about it on Minor Talk when Dana Dimel was asked by the broadcast. He says, "Hey, we're going to go recruit. We're going to go up next for filling the voids. We're going to go off, and we have a lot of production coming back next season, and it's important for us to generate NIL money." That's what he told the broadcast yesterday. Then in the post-game show, or excuse me, in the post-game media scrum, Joe Rod, our very own, and then Colin Deaver of KTSM asked two separate questions. Joe asked a question about, his thoughts about, this team. He talked about injuries. He talked about the excuses again and again on how they finished 3-9 overall. And then on the flip side, he goes off and talks to, he obviously goes and tells Colin that, hey, this is one of the reasons he believes that he'll come back. He believes that he will be part of this organization moving forward, and he thinks that this team will be, somewhere. He thought that he would be back next year. Bottom line, that was where he thought this was all going to wrap up. We thought, as a result of those answers and those things specifically, we thought that UTEP would now go into a mode of firing. So we ruled out all the possibilities of retirement. We ruled out all the possibilities of possibly him stepping down. We thought of this simply as a point for him to say, "Hey, look, I'm going to be back next year. That's what my contract says." And UTEP says this morning, nope, they will not move forward. They fire head coach Dana Dimel. And that is how we start things off here today on our emergency MinerTalk podcast here on the program. We'll start with you, Sal Montes, our co-host here on the program. Then we'll go over to Zay Galindo, who's actually in our studios right now, producing for KLAQ and for 600 ESPN El Paso. Sal, we'll go to you. Then we'll go to Zay. And I think we got Steve jumping on as well. We'll go to you first, Sal. Your thoughts, instant reactions hearing Dana Dimel out with UTEP.
Yeah, my initial thoughts originally, and Zay and I were looking at the contract. So much verbiage in there that it's a whole other dictionary when it comes to contract language. And my concern, which is now a moot point, but is there any benefit or financial gain for UTEP to hold on to him until the beginning of next year? Kind of ruled that out, but now this basically just solidifies it and just raises questions. Two big questions that I have, and one is really the most important one is what is the criteria that they have for a new head coach? That's number one. Which route do they want to go? Are they going young? They're going experience, whatever the case is. And then the other one would be is I guess more speculation, but when did they know that this would be the route that they were going to go? Was this something that was decided? Maybe they already spoke about it. And this is just speculation. I have no idea. But maybe there was something in house saying, "Hey, finish the season. We don't want this hanging over the guys' heads. Just close out the year as best as you can." That's the only other thing that I have questions of.
Really fair points there, Sal. Let's go to Zay. Zay, give me your initial reactions after this news broke this morning.
Yeah, it was something that I did expect. I thought they were going to do it. It was just a matter of when, like you guys said, and you know, how quickly do they want to hire a coach? How quickly do they want to go through this process? Do they want to get ahead of the game? Are they going to take their time, find the right guy? That's really what I want to know. How quickly, and we'll see when this happens, how quickly they go through this.
Yeah, specifically on the timing of this is so important to know. Two dates that Miner fans need to have in mind. Number one, you need to have the idea of when this team will end up actually hiring that coach, which is so important because the December 4th date is something to note. December 4th is actually the date in which UTEP, or actually all of college football, the transfer portal is actually open. So you can actually hit the transfer portal right away. So it's not only important for UTEP in a recruiting perspective to go out and recruit some of these guys hitting the portal, but it's also important to retain some of their current players. So December 4th is a date for Miner fans to definitely keep an eye out for. The other date to keep an eye out for and to understand is December 20th. That's the early signing day for college football athletes right now. That's a huge day as well for all people across college football. So two big dates to keep in mind. December 4th is right around the corner. Do I expect them to have a hire in place within a week? Well, maybe if there's urgency, maybe if they've known since the midway point of the season, which should be the reality for this UTEP football program, they should have known in the midway point of the season that they should have made a decision when the season is over. So they've had all this time to contemplate over this. This should not take very long for UTEP football. I'm putting it on them to have a quicker hire in this process. Steve Kaplowitz joins us here for our emergency podcast. We dragged him up, we dragged him out, and it's rightfully so to do this, Steve, because Dana Dimel is fired. It's a change in the UTEP football era. There's obviously a new page and a new chapter that will be written in this program's history. What's going on this morning? What did you think?
I mean, we all knew it was a matter of time. Okay. I think the biggest question was not if, it was when. And I thought it was going to happen either last night, right after the game, today, or at the latest tomorrow. So the fact that it happened today on a Sunday makes a lot of sense. I agree with you completely in the fact that they've had lots of time to think about this now. They've had, probably half the season to formulate their plan about how the buyout would go and put together a list of potential candidates. Again, I said it on social a little while ago. This was the worst kept secret really in town. We knew it was coming. We just didn't know when. And now I'm just fascinated with the possibilities, and I'm fascinated with really the timeline, how fast UTEP's going to want to act, and how quick they're going to really want to try and bring a new head coach on board.
Steve, you've written about the contract itself, and I think a lot of fans are confused about it. Can you shed a little bit of light on this, knowing that he doesn't have or he is locked in through the 2024 season? I'm talking about Dana Dimel. So the buyout process will need to be intact and in place from the athletic department perspective. Can you shed a little light on this part right here?
So when he signed his contract extension after the New Mexico Bowl loss to Fresno, it was a 2-year extension. However, the way it worked was that if the Miners did not go to a bowl either last season or this season, they would be able to buy out his 2024 base, which is $850,000 at 65%. So if you do the math, that equates to about $552,000. I keep hearing people putting 1.2, 1.3 million. Well, that includes this year. And of course he's getting paid this year. That was never in doubt. We always knew Dana was going to get paid for 2023. So the bigger key is how will 2024 work? And that's realistically what we've seen. We see that it'll come over just a little bit over $500,000 is what it'll go. Now, we don't know if they've worked something out with him, if they've decided to stretch those payments out over 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. But based on this contract and the wording, that's what UTEP will owe Dana for next season.
So I've talked to three separate players on this football team since the news broke this morning. One player specifically told me that he will return, knowing this is the deal. He was all set on leaving the program, and that he will be back on the program moving forward because of the news today that Dana Dimel was fired. I heard from another player about concerns about his future and what happens with him, because he was specifically recruited by Dana Dimel, and he's a little concerned and a little anxious about the next coaching staff and them coming in. Heard another player tell me no matter what, his mind was set. He's done and he's off the program moving forward. He's hitting the portal as soon as that portal opens up, and no other coach can convince him otherwise. So I feel like the locker room is very split right now, and I think that's a very small sample size. So you take it for what it is. If that's fair for me to say or unfair for me to say, take it for what it is. But in reality, I think the locker room is going to feel so many different ways. Tomorrow they have team meetings. They're supposed to be back in the locker rooms and back in for things like rehab, things like treatment and stuff like that after the game, which is pretty typical for this team. But I'm curious to see what staffers will be there, if this will be addressed in front of the football program moving forward, and what's to come. Zay, we've talked a lot about recruiting for this UTEP football program in the past. Where do they start? Dana Dimel was kind of quiet yesterday when he talked about the voids and specific positions that he wants to see improved. I obviously look at the wide receiver position. They've got to build more depth at the offensive line. You're losing guys on your defensive line. But what voids does this team need to fill immediately in this recruiting period? And could that sway the head coaching hire when it's all said and done?
Yeah, this team, they're going to have a lot of holes. And depending on how, this head coach, the new one that'll be coming in, whoever it is, how they're going to approach this. Are they going to come in and they're going to say, hey, let's clean house. We're going to get, almost a whole new team like we saw it, in Colorado. Obviously, UTEP doesn't have, the resources to do all that. So that probably won't happen. But, I want to see how this head coach approaches this. Whether he wants to keep intact, the squad that Dana Dimel built. He wants to try and do that. If he wants to bring in a mix of his guys, keep some of the guys that, Dana Dimel recruited. I'm very interested to see how he approaches this, because this is going to be tough.
Yeah, and you mentioned resources, man, and the first thing I'm thinking of is an NIL has to be a staple for the next head coach. NIL has to be one of the biggest things for the next head coach, and they have to value the NIL much better than this current staff or this previous staff now valued it. Dana Dimel talked about it to the broadcast, saying that NIL money is so important moving forward. Well, why wasn't it important going into this season? I know a few players benefited off NIL deals they were able to work out, and yeah, maybe some of the UTEP football administration or the athletic department helped out in that process, but they need an actual collective similar to what the men's basketball team has. Steve, how important? I mean, it seems like it's not even important, it's almost a necessity. You have to talk about a collective as almost a necessity moving forward.
It's a given. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. We've seen it for basketball. Look no further than New Mexico State. Okay, their NIL has about $500,000 in it, and that includes $300,000 for football. So that's the same total that UTEP apparently has for basketball with the minor collective. So they have got to figure out an NIL and fast, because to be honest, if you're a hotshot young coordinator and you're getting an interview for UTEP and you ask that question, hey, what's your NIL like? If you hear the answer is we don't have an NIL, you might just say, you know what, I'm not interested. That might not even be, for some coaches, that could be a non-starter if you don't have an NIL in place. So forget how much money that they're going to pay the next head coach. Forget how much they'll pay for the assistants in the assistant pool. If you are lacking NILs in college athletics these days, certain candidates won't even talk to you. And you better believe that some of these other programs that are looking for vacancies have a large NIL program in place. Imagine how much money San Diego State has right now for NIL dollars when it comes to football, probably in the millions, not a million, millions, plural. And that's the beauty of NIL, Adrian, is that if fans want to make an impact, they can directly do it by establishing NIL collectives for sports. That is their way to help really even the playing field, so to speak, with everybody else. And I think that's going to be vital. And UTEP doesn't have a lot of time to come up with this, but maybe they tell the head coach, look, we're in the process of starting one. It's going to be happening sooner rather than later. It's not like you have to pay players one lump sum to begin with. You can spread it out over 12 months to protect you so that they don't either leave, or if they don't produce right, they don't, necessarily get everything. So an NIL to me, though, is absolutely essential with this job.
Sal, this program,
Yeah.
you've been a part of this program, and we've seen this program for a while now, since Dana Dimel was the head coach. It started in 2018. They were 1-11, 2019, 1-11, 2020, 3-5, 2021, 7-6, a loss in the PUBG New Mexico Bowl that season, 2022, 5-7, and this past season, 3-9. So they obviously regressed in terms of their production. You mentioned yesterday something so interesting on MinerTalk. You talked about how this team, you felt like they overachieved with under head coach Dana Dimel. When you reflect back on where the program was in 2017, coming off a winless season, they were 0-12. But putting into perspective what Steve just talked about, the NIL collective or lack thereof for this football program, is this a better job now in 2023 than it was back in 2017? Or is it on the same level or a little worse, a tougher job? What would you say?
I think it's kind of like a glass half full, glass half empty type of view, because on one hand, we always know hindsight is 2020. We can look back and say, hey, if they would have developed something, or at least been keen to NIL around that time, or having an idea of it, you could say, yeah, for sure. But now you kind of know what you're dealing with. But when it comes to the job now, not only do you see NIL as a factor, but you've seen how much the transfer portal has grown. I mean, before it was big, year after that it was big. Last year it was huge. It's going to be even bigger this year. So now it's like there's two different aspects that you're already aware of jumping into it. However, one can look at it as like, hey, these are two more tasks that we got to accomplish aside from training guys, getting them familiar with the system, travel, all that other stuff. So if I have to pick a side, though, I think it's a better job now, knowing that you know more of what to do. It's a tougher task, so to speak, because there's more on your plate, but at least now you know what's on your plate.
Zay, how would you answer this one? And then we'll go to you, Steve.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a better job than it was in 2017. Obviously, that team that Dana Dimel inherited, it was not good at all, right? And I think the resources they've improved a little bit. Obviously, I think you're gonna have a little more expectations this time around, right? If you're this coach, maybe you're on a bit of a shorter leash because you're taking over, not a winless squad. You're seeing what Jerry Kill is doing at NMSU, so it's not impossible to win in this region. So obviously, I think it is a better job, but it's going to come with more expectations than last time.
What do you think, Steve?
I'll say this. To me, NIL makes this kind of a job easier now than it was 6 years ago. I feel like rebuilds are easier now than they were 6 years ago, just because of the NIL in place and the transfer portal. You asked a really interesting question earlier about what you need when the new head coach comes in. You might need to know a whole new team. You don't know right now how many players are leaving. You really don't. You're losing your offensive line, mostly to graduation. You could be losing a lot of your positions due to the portal. I mean, I'm always assuming the easy solution is you're going to need to recruit an entirely new ball club here for next season. You're definitely going to need quarterbacks. You know that already. You could be needing some running backs. You obviously need receivers because they needed receivers anyway this year. So I feel like from a positional standpoint, you need it all. But that being said, NIL does make a rebuild easier, including UTEP here. But you have to give whoever is coming in the tools necessary. And by the way, this next head coach needs to be able to go in and sell the program to the community. We haven't even talked about that yet, but that is so big, because if you want the fan base to buy in and try to turn this thing around, you need a coach who will be able to connect with all those fans and make the fan base want to give, want to help, and want to make sure that they can jumpstart this program to finally get it to where people have been expecting it for years.
All right. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think that the fan base definitely needs to be re-energized. Yesterday announced 10,240 fans, and there was no way. There was just absolutely no way. Maybe there was 3, maybe there was 4,000 at most, but yeah, there's just no way that there was that many fans there at the Sun Bowl, and that's a reflection of how down the city is on the football program. And when you go to some of the basketball games and you hear on talk how excited people are when it comes to that basketball team, that shows you the passion that this town has when it comes to this UTEP program, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, any sport. This fan base is hungry to finally support a winner. And I think moving forward for this program, and I think moving forward for what's ahead for this football team, they have to keep a lot of things in mind. We've talked about NIL, we've talked about fans, we've talked about current players on this team right now, and the transfer portal that's looming, the early signing day that is approaching on December 20th. There's a lot of things that comes with this. Plus, hanging over all of this is the fact that UTEP's a tough job. It's like New Mexico. When you look at that Danny Gonzalez firing that New Mexico had and announced yesterday, that hire is a tough hire, just like UTEP is. It's not impossible to win at either location. NMSU will show you that you can have success at both of those spots. But what we can take away from both of these locations, whether it's the University of New Mexico or if it's UTEP, tough places to win. And these recent coaches haven't had success at these spots. Let's talk some candidates. And it's so early in this process, but if we're talking about December 4th, that's next Monday, and that's right around the corner. So if UTEP does act fast, if they do act quickly on this, there's a lot of names that are very interesting. We've been hearing words about, possible candidates. I think it's way too early to see whether or not these are actually valid, but it's interesting to speculate. Now, former TCU head coach Gary Patterson has been talked about. I've also heard talks about Matt Wells, the former Utah State head coach. He's an Oklahoma analyst right now. Jason Eck has a lot of ties to athletic director Jim Center, and he is the Idaho head coach, and they actually spent time together back way back when. So if you talk about Mario Mocha having success with Jerry Kill, that's somebody he knew before. Well, Jim Center knew Jason Eck pretty well in their past. You can also look at Brennan Marion. That's a name that we mentioned yesterday on Miner Talk, the UNLV offensive coordinator. You could talk about Jeff Banks if you want to shoot for the moon and talk about the Texas special teams coordinator. You can also talk about Jeff Grimes, the Baylor offensive coordinator. And in fact, it's so interesting because the Baylor offensive coordinator or the coaching staff will be retained for another season, and they are actually going to have Aranda back next year, which is so interesting in itself. But guys, let's just ping around. Let's give one name that everybody kind of is interested in if UTEP actually names as a finalist, and give your reason why. We'll start with you, Steve. Give me a name out there that really interests you for this UTEP head coaching job and why.
All right. I've been thinking about this for a while, and again, it just depends on what UTEP's going for, right? Are they going to spend $1 million as a base and go up from 850 and hire somebody as the next $1 million head coach? Or are they going to try to stay in that 750 to 850 range? Because the truth is, with that difference in $250,000, that might completely change the pool of who they're going after. But, I want to see a young assistant. I want to see somebody who's been a coordinator at a Power 5 spot. And Adrian, I've talked for a while about the Oregon offensive coordinator. Okay. I think we've discussed him before. And someone that had been at UTSA when UTSA was producing, jumped to Oregon this year. You've seen what they're doing. He's making about $800,000 as the OC at Oregon right now. Would he take his first head coaching job at UTEP for $1 million? Possibly. Does he have Texas ties? Absolutely. Did he run a pretty entertaining style of offense at UTSA and now at Oregon? 100%. Do I think that's realistic? Probably not. But still, that's the kind of name I'm looking for. And I'm trying to remember exactly who his name from first and last, because we were talking about him for a while. And if you have it, go ahead and throw it out there. So just to refresh my memory.
Will Stein. And actually, this is a name that Zay threw out there yesterday. It's a great name. It's a very trendy pick right now. And I think a lot of fans were really excited about this one. Zay threw this one out yesterday. A lot of fans were pretty pumped up about hearing an offensive mind as the next head coach is a possibility for UTEP, just kind of philosophy wise. So I think that's a really good name there, Steve. Zay, we'll throw it at you. He took your name from yesterday, Will Stein. You threw out a bunch of names yesterday. So you go with a different name and give us your reason why.
Yeah, obviously I like the young offensive coordinator mine, Will Stein, Brendan Marion. But for me, I'd go with the more experienced guy, Kenny Perry, Texas Tech associate head coach. He's almost a carbon copy of, Jeff Traylor. They both have ties to Texas high school football. They were successful there. And he's been working up the ladder in college football. I think he deserves a job in Texas. I think he's a really good name, and I'd be interested to see if UTEP is on his list.
That's an interesting one, knowing there's Texas ties, knowing there's Texas high school football ties, and how trendy that's been across college football. Not only Jeff Traylor, you look at Texas Tech head coach Joey McGuire and how he cut his teeth into Texas high school football. Well, maybe one of his own on his own staff could branch off and start their own program, like Kenny Perry, just like you mentioned. Sal, I don't know if you're on dad duty. I'll swing it to you and see if we can get to you on this one. Do you have a name? You've thrown out a couple names out there for UTEP football, next possible candidate. Any names that strike you as a possible candidate for this job? I think we lost Sal to dad duties. We'll swing it back to Sal in just a second. We've asked Colin Deaver to crash our party here on our Emergency MinerTalk podcast. Colin Deaver, KTSM sports director, who's joining us here on our emergency broadcast. Colin, thanks for joining us here. I appreciate it. Give me your first reactions hearing the news today, and then we're pinging around some names. I know you probably have some names in the back of your head. Give me both of them. What was your instant reaction, and give me a name that we should kind of keep an eye out for?
I don't think anybody was surprised today, right? That this happens. I thought there was a chance that it happened last night. But I think that Jim Center gave Dana Dimel the decorum that he deserved and just kind of let him finish the season out, let him have last night, and then did the deed today, so to speak. Look, I'm sure you guys had people telling you the same thing. Like I was told all week, like that this was the expected outcome for Dana Dimel. And I do want to say, like, I get there was a lot of, vitriol all year about him, but like, I do genuinely think he deserves a lot of credit for like getting the program back to where it is, which is in a place right now where for whoever takes over, their cupboard is not bare by any means. And it's in a situation where for whoever takes over can potentially, win pretty quickly. So that's just how I feel. Like the program was in a really tough place when he took over. I get it. They never really met expectations other than that 1 year in 2021. But I do believe he left the program in a better place than he got it. So as far as people to replace him, I hope I'm not repeating any names here that you guys have said. I've been told by a couple different sources, Tony White, the Nebraska defensive coordinator, is interested in coming back home. He's a Burgess alum, has not been a head coach, but he's really risen up the ranks as like a defensive coordinator the last few years. He's at Syracuse, he was at Arizona State, he was at obviously Nebraska right now. They had a top 15 defense this year. I don't know if he's the guy that would necessarily excite fans in the way of other people, but I know he's a guy that's been wanting a head coaching gig for a while. He's been thrown around for San Diego State and Syracuse as well. So maybe he has a better offer. We'll see. But that's one. The other one that I think like UTEP fans will probably like be excited about, but he's so young, is Mac Leftwich. He's another one that I know for a fact is interested in coming back. The Texas State offensive coordinator. I just think his age may end up working against him in that regard. Just like he's 29 years old. Can you imagine me or Adrian coaching the UTEP football team? Like that's that could be a bit of a stretch. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that will definitely work against him, especially with an older athletic director in Jim Center. But he's been successful at Incarnate Word. He's been successful at Texas State. So I think like at least like his early track record is pretty strong. And the last one that I'll throw out there is a head coach at Idaho, Jason Eck. And they've been really good the last couple of years. He's turned the program around very quickly. They're, I think, the 4 seed at the FCS level in the playoffs this year. We all know about Jim's ties to Idaho. He was the athletic director there. He coached there for years. I think Eck will be, this is just my opinion, I think he'll be in the mix for UTEP as well as some other jobs. I've seen him thrown out there for New Mexico. I think it was New Mexico as well. So he's a guy that would be on my list and kind of as an up and coming head coach, but we'll see. I mean, it's so early. Like there's going to be 30 names thrown out there today that don't end up getting the job.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think there's a lot of there's going to be a lot of smoke screens too. And I'm curious on the philosophy when it's all said and done. Guys, I think we got to save a lot more for sports talk. So I want to just cut things short. It was great to do this emergency podcast to get everybody's instant reactions, instant takeaways. But let's just go around the room and just get kind of your final thoughts. Philosophy wise, where do you want to see UTEP head for their next head coach or go to with their next head coach? Steve, we'll start with you. We talked philosophy so much on the show, but let's just talk about it to kind of wrap things up here with this show here at the Emergency Podcast. Your philosophy for this UTEP hire, what would you like to see?
I'd like to see an innovative offensive coordinator, that's somebody that comes in and can run an offensive style that the fans are into. We've already seen what a good defense can do. I mean, the last few years, Bradley Del Pivito's had a great defense and it's kept them in games, but the fan base has grown disinterested because of the offense. So I would really like to see an innovative offense and hopefully a defense to match. I'd like to see somebody young come in that ultimately can win, move on, make this job a stepping stone, which is what I've believed it should be all along. And as soon as UTEP starts to embrace that philosophy, kind of like what they did with basketball after Don Haskins retired with Billy Gillespie and Tony Barbie and Doc Sadler, you start doing that for football. I think, big things could start to finally be coming in UTEP's horizon.
Zay, what do you want to see?
Yeah, I definitely want to see whoever this coach is. I want to see them recruit a completely different recruiting philosophy. I understand it's hard to recruit without NIL, so obviously they're going to need NIL. But I'm tired of seeing recruiting classes full of JUCO guys, and obviously they found some gems, Tyree Snight, guys like that. But I want to see them get into the transfer portal. I want to see them recruit locally. I want to see them recruit Texas. I want to see them recruit high school players much more. So that's the biggest thing for me.
Okay, real interesting stuff. Sal, if you can talk, just jump in.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, what do you want to see for your philosophy for this next head?
Yeah, so real quick, I'll get to that in a bit. The swing for the fences was Coach Patterson, and if I had another one, how about this name, Graham Harrell? He's
interesting one.
The offensive coordinator and QB coach out at Purdue, but he's had a stint at a number of schools. I don't know if that's concerning or not. However, he's a purely offensive guy, and that's something that the fans have been wanting. So, which leads me to your question to answer it. I want an offensive-minded guy. I think, they have the gems there on defense. Obviously, who knows who goes, who stays, whatever the case is for the football team. But if you want to excite fans and get them riled up, and you and Steve kind of touched on this earlier, just that community outreach. We saw it before with the now coach Keitha Adams for women's basketball. She was like that before she even came back the second time. Now she's at it again in the community. And then Coach Golding is huge on the community as well. So you have a chance before the new UTEP head coach to excite the community and at least win them over. For that part, of course, after that, it's going to be winning games. So I want a philosophy that's shotgun heavy, quarterback not under the center heavy, so to speak, because you want that ball flying around if you want to excite these guys.
Good stuff, Sal. Appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thanks, man.
Here. Love seeing him as well. So that's great. Colin, we'll close it out with you, and I appreciate you hopping on this emergency pod with us. Your philosophy, like the philosophy that you'd like UTEP to have when they attack this. Hey, the breadcrumbs have been there from Joe Golding. That's a guy with head coaching experience. Dana Dimel had head coaching experience way back when. What do you want to see from this hire?
kind of a combination of what everybody else has said. You need somebody who more or less can connect and understand like what UTEP is in this community, and kind of, and like you all said, get the fan base excited again. I do definitely want an offensive coach to come in this time around. I know I threw Tony White out there, but I do think you will need some offensive excitement there for this program. And just look, I really do hesitate to throw out the New Mexico State Jerry Kill comparison, but like what they have proven the last 2 years is that like you can still win football games in the borderland in 2023 in college football. Like it's still possible. So somebody that is willing to harness that and do what it takes. They threw out the transfer portal. They have not used that enough the last few years. So yeah, I would just say like a combination of everything you guys said is exactly what I'm thinking too. So
Colin, great stuff, man. I appreciate you joining us. Zay, always appreciate it. To Steve Kaplowitz, appreciate him. We'll have more on Sports Talk starting Monday at 4 o'clock. All the coverage on 600ESPNElPaso.com when it comes to all this. But for us here on Miner Talk, we're going to say so long. Download, subscribe, rate, and review. Check us out on all podcast platforms as well. This one might go up on our YouTube channel. We actually did a video component of this and even got to see Colin with his beautiful Mexico jersey. So love that. And got to see Zay's luscious hair. Got to see Samir as well, a little cameo appearance from him. So yeah, I think we might have to throw this one up on the YouTube channel and get this done. For everybody else, I'm Adrian Broaddus saying so long, and thanks for listening to Miner Talk presented by the Oscar Arieta Agency here on 600 ESPN El Paso.